Hello everybody, my name is Leo, and the time has finally come to compare these three Fire Emblem games to each other and see which one is truly the best in the 3DS saga. Now, I'm not going to compare them to other Fire Emblem games, mainly just because I know a lot about the other Fire Emblem games, I don't know enough to truly compare all of them and make a huge Fire Emblem video talking about these characters, but I will talk about these three games in general, which I have to say, all three of them are great. I love Awakening, I love Fates, I love Echoes, but which of these three games is truly the best? And how good were they for, beginning players and such? Well, this is all going to be my own opinion, so there will be things I say that some people will agree with, and there will be things that some people disagree with, so keep that in mind. And without further ado, let's get started. Now, there are going to be 7 things I'm grading these characters on. Well, characters, but I'm going to be grading these games on. Characters, villains, story, replayability, music, art styles, and little knickknacks that these games have, like tropes that not all other Fire Emblem games have. What's unique to them, and what makes a player remember this game the most? Now, without further ado, let's begin. Let's talk about the characters first, because arguably that's going to be the thing that sets a lot of people off, and is going to get me a lot of hate, so let's just get that done with, and get that mess just out of here. So, characters. Well, they're all good, to be honest. There are, tons of characters from each of these games that are absolutely beloved, not just by me, but just the Fire Emblem community in general. Characters like Lucina, Xander, and, May. These are 3 characters that are so beloved by the Fire Emblem community, and I honestly love these characters too. Now, but in my own opinion, not all of them are perfect. There are other characters in these games that I just don't like as much as other characters. Not that they're bad or that no one can like them at all, but I just don't like them as much as other characters. Characters like Severa, Arthur, or Forsyth. Not that they're bad characters per se, but I just don't like them as much as other characters. Sorry for anyone who likes them. But yeah, they're not that great. So how do we decide truly which game has the best cast of characters? Well, let's take a look at each game. Fire Emblem Awakening, no doubt, has the most recognizable cast of characters in the entire Fire Emblem franchise. You can show someone any one of these characters on here or on here, and I guarantee you, they'll know who they are, as long as they're a Fire Emblem fan, of course. Even if they weren't, and then they're in the gaming community, just show them, Chrom or Lucina's face, and they'll probably know, either from Smash Bros. Or something else. So, while Awakening does have a great cast of characters, and I do believe is the most recognizable, and to be honest, there are characters out there that I severely love and will never forget. Characters like Lucina, Chrom, and to be honest, I even love, Long Ku and stuff. Those are all great characters that I love with all my heart. So, Awakening gets props for being the most recognizable cast, and probably some of the most beloved cast of all times. Now let's go off to another game, Fire Emblem Fates. Now while Fire Emblem Fates' cast isn't as well known as Awakening's cast, in my own opinion, they do have their own really strong characters. Characters like Ryoma, Takumi, Xander, Leo. These 4 sibling brothers are probably some of the most recognizable and powerful characters in Fire Emblem just in general. What do I mean by that? Well, to be honest, if you love one of the brothers, you could hate the rest of them, to be honest. You can't hate the entire Fates cast. I really can't see that happening. Because even in the own siblings, I just can't see anyone hating all of the siblings. Each one of the siblings has something unique to them that they bring to the table that people can like. And to be honest, Xander is my favorite out of all of the Fates siblings, and he probably is with a lot of other characters as well. And this could also be said for Ryoma, Takumi, and Leo. If you don't like one of these characters, more likely than not, you're going to like the other one. While Fates does have a less recognizable face, and there are some characters that some people just don't like or even care about in the first place, there are still so many good and strong characters in this game. Not pointing to Corrin. No, not Corrin. I don't hate Corrin. She's just not my favorite, but she's so-so on the scale. But still, there are so many fantastic and great characters that even some of the bad ones can't hold them back. Can you really say Korn holds Zoro back all that much? I don't think you can you? And I am sorry that my face is so dark. Hold on. Much better. So, to be honest, Fates gets a lot of points for having some of the most powerful characters and most awesome characters in Fire Emblem history, but those more unrecognizable faces and more hated faces will bring it back a bit. Even though this is my opinion, there's just some characters' mistakes that I just can't ignore. Now, it would be unfair to just talk about those two games and leave out the more recent and very popular Fire Emblem Echoes out of the mix. So, what about Fire Emblem Echoes cast? They're nice. Okay, I'm gonna be legit with you guys. I like Echoes cast. I don't think the day will ever come when I don't say I don't like them. Now, what I said before, there are characters on here that I don't care for all that much, like such as Forsyth, Python, and sometimes Atlas. I like Atlas. Like, I feel like with Atlas and me, sometimes I'll love him, and then sometimes I'm just like, you're not that great. So, how good is Echo's cast? Well, to be honest, I don't think Echo's cast is completely, like, gonzo, like, not good. There are some really beloved faces in there, such as Celica, May, Bowie, Gray, Tobin, Matilda, Clive. I even love Cliff. But, in terms of Fates and Awakening, the two of them blow Echo's cast out of the water. And not to bash Alm, because I like Alm, but there are other characters from both Awakening and Fates that are just overall better protagonists than Alm is. And that's, again, not a bash against Alm. Alm is really, really cool. And I don't think anyone will ever really hate Alm, but when you compare him to, like, characters like Xander, or sometimes even Chrom outdoes him, that isn't an insult. That's just saying that Alm isn't that great of a protagonist. He's not the greatest protagonist, but he certainly isn't the worst. I like Alm, and I can find ways that I relate to Alm, but he's not the best out there, and Alm isn't the only character like this. There are tons of other characters out there that I just don't like as much as these other characters. So, I'm sorry, Echoes, but you are not in the running to win the characters qualifier. I still love you, though, and your characters are very fun, and I love a lot of them. So that just leaves Fates and Awakening. So, which of these had the better cast of characters? Will I go with Awakening, who has a more recognizable and beloved cast, or will I go with Fates, who, while not be as well-rounded, has some really powerful and strong beloved characters? To be honest, if I'm going by casts, as great as Fate's characters are, Awakening has to win this one. Awakening's cast of characters are just so well-rounded, and I don't really see myself hating all that many of them. To be honest, after Fates came out, I started not caring about some Fire Emblem characters altogether, but Awakening's cast characters, I never disliked. Sure, there's some of them I don't care about, but I just don't hate them. So, with that out of the way, Fire Emblem Awakening wins the first round to decide which is best on the 3DS. Now let's move on to villains. Oh boy, this one is... it's gonna get some people triggered. Alright, Fire Emblem villains. Fates and Awakening obviously did not have the best villains of all time, as most of you know. But what's my opinion on them? Gangrel was a dick. Walhart was kind of cool. Like, he was like a legit conqueror. I really liked him. And Valadar, not Valabar. Valadar, I'm sorry. Let's talk for a minute about these 3 games and a problem that they have that needed to be corrected and needs to be corrected but isn't going to be. What is up with our fathers? In Fire Emblem Awakening, big shock reveal! Valadar's our father! Shocker! In Conquest, Fates, Revelations, to be honest, it's DLC. Anonkos is our father! In Fire Emblem Echoes, Emperor Rudolph is Alm's father? What's up with that? Like, do the Fire Emblem games constantly need for a father, like a secret father figure, to make them good all of a sudden? Even if this was decided before Echoes even came out, what is up with that? Like, all the time. Like, I haven't played one of these games where there hasn't been a secret father reveal of our father actually being the bad guy that we have to take down. What? And first off, Robin's the only one who ever finds out legitimately. Corn never finds out, and Alm finds out right after he kills him. Okay. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but it's like, how many times are you going to do this? I really hope this isn't something that's going to stick forever, because while the whole "I am your father" deal is always something that's beloved by a lot of people, and some people think it's really cool, don't do it forever. Let it go sometimes. I'm pretty sure the Fire Emblem community will forgive you if one villain isn't the protagonist's father. Seriously, stop. We already have a Darth Vader figure in Fire Emblem that does a great job. The Black Knight. He's awesome. He's the only Darth Vader figure that we need. And guess what? He wasn't the father. So, seriously, lay off with the whole "I am your father" business. Fire Emblem, you're great, but Star Wars isn't your thing. You can use it once or twice, sure, but don't keep using it, please. I'll forgive you if the next Fire Emblem villain isn't my father. Alright? So, Valadar, yeah. After, like, the whole more fathers business, I just don't think he's that great anymore. I didn't think he was great to begin with. He was very interesting, and sometimes it was like, oh my god, my father. And it's like, oh, more fathers. Yeah, he kind of died out. Let's talk about Fate's villains, then. So how good are they? I'm sure they'll be awesome. Okay, never mind. Not digging up that hole. Especially considering that, in my opinion, Fate's villains aren't the best. They're not... I don't even know if I can't say that they're the worst, because I'm pretty sure people will eat me alive if I don't say that they're the worst. But, in my opinion, I've seen worse villains out there. As for Fate's villains, Garen's a dick, Hans is a dick, and, let's see, what were my impressions about... Oh yeah, Dick. Pretty much all of them. I can't really think of any Fire Emblem Fates villain that wasn't a total asshole to us at some point. The Fates villains made some pretty interesting villains, but... as good as they were villains, they were technically the good guys too, so can't really count them all that much. What about Mikoto? She became a villain. Oh, she's our mom, and that's an anime trope. Okay. What about Azura's mom? Oh, never mind. Yeah, she's not even on that screen for that much, to be honest. Wow, never mind. And Anankos. Okay, well, there is another trope that needs to be discussed. Dragons, gods, falling to corruption, and the heroes needing to defeat them. So, Anankos seems to fall in that line very much so. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's, like, also kind of weird. That's also becoming a thing. I won't mind it. That's, like, the one thing I don't really mind in Fire Emblem, because, like, it makes sense a little bit more. The father thing is something that you can deal without, but I kind of like the concept of gods, like, falling to corruption over time. And if I see that in more Fire Emblem games, I honestly won't mind it as much as the father thing. Because, to be honest, it's a really interesting thing to think about. Powerful beings eventually falling to corruption. And to be honest, every game has their own little knick-knack to them that kind of has, like, this is what the story is based off of. A lot of Fire Emblem games, of course, are based off of a Fire Emblem, but at the same time, they can also have, like, this sense of, like, this used to be the good guy, but because he's so powerful, he feels corruption. And I honestly think that, I honestly won't mind if that's a recurring thing in Fire Emblem. I really won't. So, that doesn't bother me as much, but Anankos could have been so much better, as well as Garen and Hans, and just a ton of other Fire Emblem Fates villains, so... yeah, Fates, I'm sorry, I can't give you the point on your villains. In my opinion, not that great. So, right now, Awakening seems to have the best cast of villains. But wait, what about Echo's villains? Did they improve? Well, let's talk about Emperor Rudolph, since there's this father trait that is driving me insane. Despite being the father, oh my god. I really don't think Rudolph is that bad of a villain. He was very interesting. I really felt a real commanding presence whenever we saw one of his scenes. And to be honest, I was intimidated him when he said, "Did he now?" when he found out that took up the leadership role. And to be honest, Emperor Rudolph, overall, I think is like one of the most badass looking Fire Emblem villains of all time. He even has one of the best fight scenes of all time I've ever seen. Oh my god, that's great. Too bad he didn't display that again in the boss fight. To be honest, I get why they implemented why Rudolph won't attack you, but I kind of wish they did. I don't know, it's kind of like when a Fire Emblem boss doesn't fight back and you just fought regular enemies to get to them. I mean, sure, it was challenging and it was fun, but it was kind of like, and I like what they did, but it was like, can he fight me, please? So it doesn't feel like I'm just being an ass. Well. But still, I think Rudolph was a pretty great villain. But let's talk about Fernand and Berkut. And while we're at it, I might as well just talk about Desai and Slade as well, since they're also reoccurring villains. And Jeddah, why not? So, Desai and Slade. Cowards, scumbags, kill immediately. But of course, they're the Fire Emblem villains that we love to hate. But to be honest, I've seen enough corrupt Fire Emblem officials in Fates. And somewhat Awakening. Not as much as Awakening, but yeah, I've seen a lot of a corrupt official douchebags enough. Sure, I hate these guys, but I've already had enough hatred more than understandability in these Fire Emblem games, if that makes sense. Over time, when you have so many villains that you just hate, you kind of want to get villains that you can understand and relate to more. So, Desai and Slade being these scumbags, sure, well, Desai kind of had a good reason to kill the king, and you can really see why the king needed to fall. At the same time, it was like, dude, you feel like Iago. You feel like a legitimate copy of Iago. And Slade almost felt like Hans, too. I'm sorry if that makes anyone angry. My personal opinion. But what about Berkut and Fernand? Fernand was a very more interesting case for me, because Fernand is dealing with this whole thing of where he's an ununderstandable villain. He's a noble who's now being forced to take orders from a peasant? A commoner? Even though Alm's my boy, and don't get me wrong, Alm is my boy. I love Alm, even if I don't think he's that great of a protagonist. Sorry. I still love Alm. And that's not gonna change. He's a great guy. But I can see where taking orders from a commoner after being of noble birth for so long and being taught to live this way for so long can be upsetting. And when you learn about Fernand's backstory and what happened to him and his manor and his family, he begins to become that understandable Fire Emblem villain that I've been waiting for so long. I understood Fernand. I understood why he had these morals to fight against us. And to be honest, I really did enjoy fighting Fernand. But what about Berkut? Berkut, not as much as his father, in my own opinion, had also a very commanding and dangerous presence to him whenever he appeared. And I will never forget his theme song, Pride and Arrogance. Oh my god, that theme song. I've edged that into my memory by now. I love it so much. So, to be honest, Berkut is an incredible, commanding, and powerful presence in the Fire Emblem franchise just as a whole. And gods, I loved Berkut's battles. I loved fighting Berkut. There are tons of levels, well, sure, Berkut made me want to pull my hair out because it was so hard at times, but when I figured out what I was doing, I found the levels to be so much more enjoyable, and fighting Berkut was always a joy. And seeing him as that proud and arrogant warrior who would rather die in an executioner's blade than admit defeat to Alm and suck up to him is such it was like so cool to see this, because like it shows that he's a proud and prideful warrior. He's not some guy that's gonna suck up to you just because you're in power, and that is something that I like about Berkut. Jeddah. Okay, I'm not gonna go there. No. So Fire Emblem Echoes, you have successfully secured yourself a victory in the second round. So that gives 1 point to Awakening and 1 point to Echoes. Fates, you're slacking. But let's talk about the next thing. The art styles. Oh man, these art styles. I love the way that all three of these games look. While there isn't that much to talk about in the art styles, I'm going to be legitimate with you people. A lot of the art styles are all good. While Echo's cutscenes aren't that great looking, they're still good looking to me, but they don't compare to both Fates and Awakening. To be honest, I wish Echo's cutscenes were animated in the similar style that Fates and Awakening was, but I still love the styles that they were animated in, and I will never forget them. So, to be honest, Echo's art style is my least favorite, but still very much beloved in my heart. So that leaves Fates and Awakening. Awakening's cast of characters, while I did like the way that they were drawn and designed, and there are really good designs within them, overall, Fates has stolen my heart with art. I love the way that Fates looks. I loved these cutscenes. The cutscene with Ryoma where the flames go around him. The cutscenes with Azura where the water goes all around her. The times where they stop and show us the pictures on how beautiful this place can look. The kingdoms. How great these castles were. Visually, I think Fire Emblem Fates is the best looking Fire Emblem game of all time. Well, not all time, I'm sorry. Everyone has their own opinions. But out of the 3DS ones, this one looks visually the best to me. Sorry, but that's how it is. My opinion. My video. Sorry. So, let's talk about their music now. Oh boy, the music in these games are absolutely great. Fire Emblem Awakening, I'm gonna be legitimate with you people, doesn't have the strongest music track. While I like the songs from Awakening, I just don't love them as much as as these two games right here. Awakening has good music, but in my opinion, not the best soundtrack. These two games, however, I love their soundtracks. Fates has so many diverse soundtracks in them that it's so hard to even forget one of them, while Echo's soundtracks sometimes sound so badass. It feels so intense, and when they're mixed in with the characters that they're mixed in with, like the Pride and Arrogance theme, or the Emperor's theme, or any one of those themes that go on with these bad guys, I feel such a more powerful and demanding presence, as if I'm in actual danger. So Echo's themes are absolutely badass, but it takes more than having a badass soundtrack and having intimidating presence to be a good Fire Emblem music track. Fates, however, did the tracks right. There is so much diverse music in Fates. There is so many different culture types of music that it can really cater to almost anyone in there. So Fates, once again, steals the next victory for this contest. So right now, Fates is in the running to win this baby. Oh my god, Fates, your music is great. Lost in Thoughts All Alone is great. And while Inheritors of Arcana is a pretty good song, Lost in Thoughts All Alone, all the way, baby. So that gets out 4 of 7 of our competitions out of the way. So let's talk about their stories. Well, Awakening has a pretty interesting story. There are 3 arcs to the story. One where you get introduced to everything. One where you go up in a full conquest against Valm. And one that didn't make that much sense, but it was still cool, I guess. As for Fate's stories, there are 3 different stories where you can go on. You can go on Birthrights, which is my official least favorite Fire Emblem game of all time, as of right now, because I haven't played Shadow Dragon. I heard that one's pretty bad too, but I still like it. I just don't love it as much as the other ones. Conquest story is phenomenal to me. I love how it shows moral gray, and I love all the character progressions. And Xander's Justice as an illusion line is so great. You can say whatever you want about that. It's still just a nice moment in Fire Emblem where you realize there is no right and wrong to this war. There's so much more great, more to be seen. And more than Birthrights will ever show you. Revelations, may not have been the strongest story out there, but it was still a pretty good story, in my own opinion. Not the best, but I feel like there have been worse stories told. As for Fire Emblem Echoes, I really like their story. Like I said before, I don't remember which video I said this in, but how I put this lightly. Alm's story is better than Celica's. Sorry. I kind of already had these predictions when I went into the game. I knew that I would like Alm's story more than I like Celica's story, and I would like Celica more than I like Alm, which became true in the end. Alm is a great character, but not as good as Celica, but the story and path that Alm took, there was so much more great to be seen, and there was just so epic and action-packed. I felt thrills. I felt like a need to finish. I felt a need to know the end of Alm's story. And while I certainly like Celica's pathway and her story, I just don't love it as much as Alm. Alm's story is probably one of the best stories I've ever seen in Fire Emblem. And to be honest, both Fates, Conquest, and Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, both outdo Awakening stories altogether. So really, which one of these stories did I like more? Again, the I'm your father trope is just so old to me, and it's something that could just easily been removed from the game, and I would not care. I would legit not care. Can you honestly say that you would hate Echoes if they just said, oh, by the way, Rudolph's not your father, it's someone else? Like, seriously, like, is that such a bad thing? To be honest, I could go out with Rudolph being our father, but that will not dissuade me from loving Alm's pathway, and I still love Alm's pathway. But there are things from Fire Emblem Fates Conquest that are still recognizable as well. The sense of moral gray, the battles up ahead, the teachings that they show us. Fire Emblem Echoes feels like they're telling a story of moral gray, and Fire Emblem Fates feels like a story that teaches you about moral gray as well as you can feel it. There are some instances like Xander's justice is an illusion sign, or just Corrin's struggle overall. Corrin, despite what you may say about him, has the most unique Fire Emblem game of all time in Conquest. How many times do you see a lord in Fire Emblem struggling to fight their own kingdom because it's so corrupt? How many times do you see a lord fighting his own kingdom as he is literally the prince of that kingdom because of such a corrupt manner? Corrin's game, despite everything, is just so unique in the Fire Emblem franchise. It's something that you don't get to see very often. Being in the enemy side, but trying to make the enemy more or less the good guys. Showing us that the bad guys aren't always that bad. Showing us who's really in here. Who is everyone really the evil scumbags, the dishonorable cowards that we make them out to be in Hoshido? No, there's more to them, and Conquest shows that greatly. Now, while I believe Conquest does have a very strong story, and is one of my favorite Fire Emblem games of all time, Fire Emblem Echoes gets a lot of prop points for just being such an intense story all the way through. It was something that I wanted to follow up on, something I never wanted to put down, and all the same can be said with Conquest, and sure, Conquest is better played in a way. That's also something I would talk about the gameplay in a little bit. Fire Emblem Echoes story is just such a delight. If I was going it through story-wise, like, seriously, if Fire Emblem was a visual novel, just throwing that out there, Echoes would be by far the best one I've seen so far. I'm sorry, but in my own opinion, Echoes has such a great story through Alm and through Celica, and Fates' stories, while Conquest is a great story that I love, to be honest, it's not exactly perfect. I can forgive it for some instances, but it's not 100% perfect. Birthright is my least favorite Fire Emblem game that I've played so far, and Revelations, while not my least favorite, it is definitely not the best. So Echoes wins this round. But before we get on to the next round, there is something I must talk about Echoes that Fire Emblem Awakening and Conquest has. And this is actually going to tie in nicely with this round, so I might as well just do it. the little interesting knickknacks that each of these games have. Each of these games play differently. Fire Emblem Awakening has a support and pair-up system, which comes back in Conquest, but more balanced. To be honest, Awakening system is really broken, but at the same time, very random and luck-based. I mean, come on, there's always those instances where you're just like, please, block the attack, or get a hit in yourself, please. Please. It's kind of weird to, like, act that way. And this is a game about strategy, not a game of, okay, let this guy attack and let this guy block. It's really not that. I just don't like that about Fire Emblem Awakening. That kind of thing could have been done differently. And while this game does have some pretty interesting features in it, like child units, and to be honest, the marriage system is something that I love in Fire Emblem Awakening, but I cannot say gameplay-wise it is the best. That one has to go to Conquest. In terms of gameplay, Conquest is the best game I have seen so far. Mainly just because it's so much fun. There's so many times where you have to really think strategically, where you have to think outside the box, where it forces you to be a real tactician, not just some guy who's saying, hey, go there and obliterate this entire army by yourself. Good. And to be honest, the pair-up system has been fixed so greatly. Now I know what my partner is going to do, rather than just wondering, oh my god, what's happening? To be honest, I kind of wish something similar would happen in Echoes, but to be honest, at the same time, I realize that it has no place in Echoes. But let's talk about other Conquest knickknacks. Now, to be honest, the My Castle thing is probably one of my favorite things about Fire Emblem Conquest. And as Fire Emblem Fates just in general, building my own castle is such a delight, and I love it. And I really do hope I see it again in some other Fire Emblem games, just because it's so much fun to make our own castle. It feels something that's just so much more personal and gives us so much more control in the game. Something that you don't get a lot from Fire Emblem Echoes or Fire Emblem Fates, or Fire Emblem Awakening. So, Fates gets a lot of props for having that in. But there is one thing that Fire Emblem Fates did that's not great. That is our child units, and we are not talking about them. Now, Echoes definitely has a lot of unique things to them. But how good are these unique things, and are they really something you want in other Fire Emblem games? Well, for one, they get rid of the marriage system. Oh well. But they keep supports. Good. It's always nice to have supports in Fire Emblem games, and I really feel like that's just something that should stick forever. And to be honest, while I love pairing up my units and getting them married, I can go without it. It's not that bad. Although it's kind of sad to see Faye just instantly just get rejected by alms like, Faye, I'm for sale. God, fuck that shit. Huh. Oh, man. Sorry, Faye. But yeah, it definitely has its own unique features, such as dungeon exploration, Milla's turn wheel, and being able to explore castles and grab items. Now, while these things are great, Echoes has a bad reputation with me for being such a damn repetitive game. To be honest, there are some times where I just saw the same map again, and I was like, what? Other than, Fates Awakening had so many different maps, and love them or hate them, at least they tried to give us new maps and more exciting maps. Echoes just sometimes just repeated the maps. And to be honest, it felt so lazy. Almost as lazy as when they just put in the Awakening characters in Fates. You cannot defend Echoes on this. How can you? Yeah, I love Echoes when they repeat their maps, making me the literally exact same map again, and playing it again. Really? Dungeon exploration is pretty cool too, and while I would definitely love to see in more Fire Emblem games, I just hope they add in more spice to them. Don't make them like Echoes entirely, because there were some kinks in dungeon exploration that I feel like could have been fixed, but I still loved it regardless. As for Milla's turn wheel, I really feel like it only has a place in Echoes. Why do I say that? Well, every Fire Emblem game, I believe, has, or should at least have, their own little trope that makes them unique. And I feel like Echoes deserves Miller's Turnwheel all to itself. Why do I say that? Well, to be honest, Miller's Turnwheel is awesome, but it's also at the same time not that great. To be honest, if you could think about it, if you put Miller's Turnwheel in a game like Fire Emblem Conquest, it'd be kinda, like, not the same. It would be so weird. And there are enough force mechanics in the games, and that's another reason. In Fire Emblem Echoes, Miller's Turnwheel is kind of given to us in a not so forced way, but in a kind of weird way. It's like, okay, I'll just take this. But to be honest, if they keep doing it, I feel like eventually it will get forced. Just like the child units in Fates. Like, we saw what happened when you put child units in Fates. Despite people loving child units in Awakening, when you force them into Fates, it was just such a mess. And sure, while the child units, I don't hate them, but I can, like, this mechanic was just not a good addition in my opinion. So as for Miller's Turnwheel, stay with Echoes. Keep Echoes, like, give Echoes at least something that makes us really love it and want to come back to it. And while it has enough of that already, I really feel like Miller's Turnwheel should stay with Echoes. Unless players really want it back so badly, but to be honest, I feel like it's just that one thing that should just stay with Echoes and just Echoes. But that's just my opinion. Just, if you don't think so, tell me in the comment section below, but don't yell at me saying I'm an idiot for not liking it. It's not that I don't like it, it's just that I really feel like it's just a mechanic that should stay with its own game. And a lot of games have things like these. Things that should just stay with them forever and ever and ever. And never be seen in another game, because it's their game. Unless they make a remake of this game, then yeah, I'd be fine with bringing back Miller's Turnwheel. It's a remake. But at least update it in a certain way. I don't know. Don't make it infinite. I like how there's like a certain amount of time you can use this thing. But please, do not keep implementing it or force it into any other games. I'll be just fine without it. And I think other players will be as well. So, in terms of, like, little knickknacks and things that they put in there, Fates gets this points again. So, sorry Awakening, sorry Echoes, but looks like Fates in the lead, with Fire Emblem Awakening having 1 point, Echoes having 2 points, and Fates having 3 points. Now, we've discussed characters, we've discussed villains, we've discussed their stories, their music, their art styles, and their knickknacks. So that only leaves one topic left. Replayability. Oh man, let's talk about replayability. Now, how would we discuss how these games are replayable? Well, Fire Emblem Awakening, I feel like one thing that people really do get to come back to the games is most certainly just like, well, to be honest, pair-ups and just like different unit combinations and just going through the story with their many different choices and seeing how each of those choices will affect the story and the gameplay overall. So while I definitely love replaying Fire Emblem Awakening, there are tons of things in these other games that I think are also replayable. So before we decide Fire Emblem Awakening being the sole winner, because let's be honest here, its replayability is awesome. Let's talk about these other games. Now, while Fire Emblem Fates has 3 different games to replay, and while I love the 3 stories, what do I think about replaying Fire Emblem Fates? Well, to be honest, I don't like replaying Fates as much as I like replaying Fire Emblem Awakening. Fire Emblem Awakening was just a game that you could replay anytime, and I always get psyched about. Well, Fire Emblem Fates is like one of those games that you replay, and while I feel like a bit of nostalgia coming back to it, I can't get that same feeling from when I go back to Awakening. So I'm sorry, Conquest, Fates, I love you, but Awakening should take the cake with this one. As for Fire Emblem Echoes, I'm gonna be honest, I can't really see all that much replayability. Sure, there are different, like, combinations you can do with the villagers, and you can leave Cliff and Faye behind and get them on Celica's route, but for one, they can't even support with any of Celica's characters, and for two, they'll be under-leveled. Do I really want to go back and grind and not progress the story for God knows how long? To be honest, Echoes as a replayability, I've not once had, like, the desire to go, I don't want to play Echoes again. Get my new save file, start it up, play it again, just for the kicks. But with Fire Emblem Awakening and Echoes, Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates, I constantly do feel like I really want to replay these games. I really want to go back to them, replay them, see what they all have to offer, choose the different choices. But overall, Awakening has to win this one, because it is just the best replayable game out there. Sorry Echoes, sorry Fates, but Awakening takes the cake with this one. So, with that, it sounds like Fates is the solid winner, with Awakening having 2 points, Echoes having 2 points, and Fates having 3 whole points. But, as I was going over this, I realized this is why you should make a script before you make videos. There is one other important trait that these games also have that I need to discuss. Their difficulties. Oh boy, so let's talk about how difficult these games can get. Fire Emblem Awakening, piss easy. You can get through it very easily. At least in my opinion. Again, this entire video is just opinion based. So, if Awakening is a hard game for you that you can't beat for some reason, I'm sorry, but that game was super, super easy for me. Birthright's also incredibly easy. Revelations, it was like a very medium level difficulty for me. I could get by it, but I wasn't like stuck on it. As for Fire Emblem Conquest and Fire Emblem Echoes, it gets a bit different. Selka's path, I feel like, is a bit harder than Alma's path. So, she's still good, but I feel like things are a little more broken on her side of the things. As for Alma's path and Conquest path, I love the difficulty settings in both of these games. Conquest difficulty was so good to me, and Echo's difficulty on Alma's path was just simply amazing. Now, while their final boss fights, I feel like some things were kind of BS, such as Takumi, and then Duma. Yeah, thank you for respawning hundreds of units, only allowing Alm to attack you, and then damaging me from afar, and not just, like, one unit, but all of my units, just by summoning the spirits of the earth. Thank you. Yeah, I also have to deal with Jeddah as well. So while I'm killing him, I'm taking, like, 10 to 17 damage. I need to drink this. To all my other units, while these other units come by and try to kill me as well. Granted, I can deal with them easily, but still, it doesn't make me forgive the game. But, other than that, I feel like Echo's consistency with difficulty is pretty good, while Selka's is a little more broken. It's still pretty good. Conquest, however, had such a great, consistent difficulty that I really did love. And to be honest, the only really time I ever really had a bullshit thing happen to me with Garen is when he got a 9% crit, which should not happen in a Fire Emblem game. To be honest, other than that, I would have won, especially because I was right at the end. I hate that so much. I'm getting triggered just remembering it. But yeah, I had such good consistency with, like, the entire game. And while Takumi can get annoying and Duma can sometimes be BS, to be honest, like, did he seriously need to summon the spirits of the earth? Really? I still get by, and I still find myself enjoying these more or less. More or less the boss fights with the actual bosses. I remember the intense feeling I got as I was strategically placing my units all around Takumi, trying to make sure that they don't die, but to take him out this turn as well. And in Fire Emblem Echoes, it was such an intense feeling seeing Alm go up against Duma all by himself, but at the same time not alone. So many other people were there supporting him, and the epicness of it, like just like seeing who's gonna land this attack, who's gonna finish it all off, was just such a great thing in Fire Emblem Echoes that I will never personally forget. But at the end of the day, only one of these games can be more fair of a difficulty or more better of a difficulty than the other. Now, as in terms of gameplay, the winner is decided. Conquest does win for being less repetitive, for being just more unique, and to be honest, just better in general. It's not repetitive. It's more diverse. And to be honest, there are just some systems in Conquest that I just loved using. Sure, these systems may not work so well in Echoes, but they were just some things I like better. But Echoes overall had a very consistent difficulty with it. It was so much fun playing Echoes. Almost as fun as playing Conquest. And to be honest, there were times where it even surpassed Conquest. Now, sure, the game gets repetitive. It gets kind of simple. Like, there's not a lot of diversity to it. And there are just some things in Echoes that I feel like could have been adjusted on or improved. But overall, these two games have really great difficulties. Now, as for who has the better difficulty, Conquest, I feel like I have more fun playing, but Echoes, I feel like just has such a great amount of difficulty where you really have to strategize, and I just love the intense feeling I get through these battles. So, I'm going to give the points to both of them. Cut them in half. So, at the end of the day, the best game to reach the Fire Emblem 3DS, in my own opinion, is Fire Emblem Fates.
Whoa, stop. Hear me out, please. Hear me out. Hear me out. Just give me a sec. Hear me out, please. Just give me. Hold up. Just stop. Just give me a second.
I will admit, Fates has its problems. It's not the greatest Fire Emblem game out there. I know that. But to be honest, in terms of the 3DS, it is just so much fun to play. And its story is just so unique, too, depending on which pathway you go on. And while Echoes and Awakening are both great games that have their own great features about them, there are just things that Fates does better than them. I hate to say it, but it's just my own opinion. And to be honest, you can't change that. There are just some things that people have to accept, you know? I love Fire Emblem Echoes, and I love Fire Emblem Awakening, and I always will. But when it comes down to it, in my own opinion, Fire Emblem Fates is the best Fire Emblem game to be out there on the 3DS. It is such a great game. Oh, God, excuse me. It is such a great game. I love playing it. I may not always look forward to going back to it as much as Awakening. It's still really good. There's just something about it that I love so much. And I know some people have different opinions, but I at least ask that you try to look at it from my perspective and understand. It's just a difference in opinion. I will never say Fates, or Echoes, or Awakening are perfect games. But each of them has something about them that I love so much, and I will never forget. And I will always be a Fire Emblem fan, no matter what anyone says or what everyone does. But anyways, thank you for all watching this video, and thank you so much for understanding. It means so much to me. You guys are great, and as always, take care.